My world tilted on its axis with a single, overheard phone call. For the past 10 days, I have been working from my home office in our Seattle apartment to care for my stepdaughter, Lena, who had supposedly sustained a severe wrist injury. The story was that a heavy case of archived files had slipped from a shelf at the law firm where she worked as a paralegal, fracturing her dominant right wrist. At 24, Lena had been living independently in a studio apartment across the city for 2 years, ever since she graduated with her associate's degree. I'd been in her life for 5 years, married to her father, Robert, for the last 3. When Robert and I first started dating, Lena was civil but distant. Her parents' divorce had been finalized only a year prior, a messy affair that left deep scars. She wasn't ready to see her father with someone new. Our initial meetings were strained. She would answer my polite questions about her university courses or friends with monosyllabic replies, her eyes fixed on anything but me. At restaurant dinners, she always managed to sit next to her father, placing him as a physical barrier between us. Once, when I offered to help her pick out a new laptop for school, she declined, saying she'd already made plans to go with her mother. Gradually, a fragile, respectful relationship formed. It was never warm, but it was functional. She started wishing me a happy birthday with a text message, asked about my work as a graphic designer occasionally, and even complimented a meal I'd cooked. That delicate truce shattered 4 months ago during a weekend visit. She and Robert were in his study, looking over the blueprints for a custom piece of furniture he was building, a passion project of his. Their voices, initially low, escalated into a heated argument. I stayed in the living room, giving them privacy, but I couldn't avoid hearing the hurtful words. Lena stormed out of the study, her face flushed with anger. She grabbed her coat and bag and left without a backward glance. Robert later told me, his voice heavy with regret, that she had accused him of being more present and engaged in this new marriage than he ever was in his first. She claimed he had always prioritized his woodworking projects in his home workshop over family, that his absence was a constant void during her childhood, and that it was a key reason her mother had felt so neglected and ultimately left. The central issue in Robert's first marriage was, indeed, his woodworking. It was more than a hobby. It was an all-consuming passion. Evenings and weekends were spent in a detached garage he had converted into a workshop, surrounded by the scent of sawdust and varnish. He missed school plays, parent-teacher conferences, and countless family dinners, always promising that the next commissioned piece would bring in significant extra income. He specialized in intricate handcrafted tables and chairs, spending substantial amounts on rare woods and specialized tools. He was a member of a local artisan guild and traveled to craft fairs and woodworking exhibitions several times a year, sometimes for entire weekends. Meanwhile, his ex-wife, Isabel, shouldered the vast majority of parenting duties, managing Lena's school life, driving her to soccer practice, and dealing with teenage dramas largely on her own. The financial pressure was also a constant strain. Isabel came from old money and was accustomed to a certain lifestyle. She insisted on designer clothes for herself and Lena, frequent expensive salon visits, and lavish home renovations that stretched their comfortable dual income to its limits. She would often have to ask her parents for financial help to cover these luxuries, which created a deep-seated resentment from her family toward Robert. Her father, a stern, successful businessman, made no secret of his disapproval. He frequently commented that a real man would ensure his wife never had to ask her father for money. One Christmas, he gifted Robert a subscription to a financial planning magazine in front of the entire family, a thinly veiled insult that hung heavily in the air. Robert's woodworking became the easy scapegoat, labeled a selfish, money-draining indulgence, while Isabel's spending was rarely questioned. The arguments about time and money grew more frequent and vitriolic, and despite having been high school sweethearts, they separated when Lena was 19. By then, Lena was firmly in her mother's camp. viewing her father's absence in his workshop as the root of all their family's problems. The divorce was brutal. Isabel portrayed herself as a long-suffering wife who would put her own career ambitions on hold, though she had always worked part-time in interior design. The settlement was heavily in her favor, including a large portion of Robert's savings and investments. When Robert and I began dating 2 years after his divorce, I noticed a significant shift in his priorities. He still loved woodworking, but it was now confined to Wednesday nights and the occasional Sunday afternoon. He made a conscious effort to be present. He signed up for a pottery class with me, though his large, skilled hands were comically clumsy with the delicate clay. He attended my family's gatherings enthusiastically, engaging my nieces and nephews in a way that felt natural and warm. I appreciated his efforts immensely, but I also understood why Lena viewed this transformation with such bitterness. It must have felt like a betrayal, proof that he could have been this man all along, but chose not to be for her and her mother. After their argument 4 months ago, Lena cut off all contact. She didn't call on Robert's birthday and sent a terse last-minute text declining our invitation for Thanksgiving. Then, a week and a half ago, we got the call about her wrist injury. She claimed the doctor had put her in a rigid cast and ordered complete rest for the wrist, making it impossible for her to cook, drive, or even dress easily. Her initial plan was to stay with her mother, but Isabel, she said, was in the middle of a major, out-of-state design project and wouldn't be back for weeks. Robert was worried sick. Despite being swamped with a major client project with a fast-approaching deadline, I immediately arranged to work remotely. I saw it as an opportunity, a chance to finally bridge the gap between us. Robert suggested we hire a nurse or a helper, but I insisted on doing it myself. I wanted to show her I cared. For over a week, I became her dedicated caretaker. I prepared all her meals, cut her food for her, drove her to a follow-up doctor's appointment, filled her prescriptions for painkillers and anti-inflammatories, and constantly rearranged my work calls around her needs. I set up a comfortable space for her on our sofa with extra pillows, stocked the fridge with her favorite snacks, and even bought her a new tablet and subscribed to a streaming service, so she could watch movies with one hand. When she complained that the keyboard on my old laptop was too stiff for her left hand, I went out and bought a new, ergonomic wireless keyboard for her to use. I was running myself ragged, but I did it willingly, hoping this shared time would heal old wounds. Yesterday morning, I returned from a quick trip to the grocery store. As I walked down the hall toward the kitchen, I heard her voice in the living room, loud and animated. I paused, my hand tightening on the grocery bag, when I heard my name. She was on the phone, laughing. No, it's perfect. Rebecca is running around like my personal assistant. It's almost too easy. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Silently, I pulled out my phone and started recording. She was talking to her mother. I mean, I could do everything myself, but watching her fuss over me, it's what they both deserve. She chuckled. I've gotten really good at the whole injured act. I even practice my pain expressions in the mirror. The best part is Dad looks so guilty, it's priceless. When her mother asked how long she planned to keep it up, Lena replied, another few weeks for sure. Why not? It's the least Dad owes us after all those years he spent locked in his workshop. He owes me. I left the apartment immediately, my hands trembling. I sat in my car and called Robert, my voice shaking as I explained what I had heard. I sent him the recording. He left his office immediately and was home within 20 minutes. We confronted her together in the living room. At first, she denied everything, her face a mask of injured innocence. But when I played the recording, her composure cracked. After a few flimsy justifications, she finally broke down and admitted the truth. She hadn't been injured at all. She had been laid off from her paralegal job over a month ago after a series of conflicts with a new supervisor. She was too embarrassed and proud to tell her father, fearing he would see it as a failure on her part, a lack of responsibility. She had enough savings, but didn't want to dip into them. She had initially asked to stay with her mother, but Isabel, who had recently started a serious relationship with a wealthy financier, didn't want her adult daughter cramping her style. So, together, they had concocted the wrist injury story. The planning was meticulous. Lena had researched common symptoms of a scaphoid fracture online. The doctor's appointment. I drove her to a coffee shop where she met a friend who worked at a medical supply store, who provided her with a realistic-looking wrist brace and some official-looking but fake paperwork. The prescriptions were obtained through a doctor who was a close friend of her mother's, who wrote them without an examination as a personal favor, a fact I knew was highly unethical, if not illegal. Robert was deeply disappointed. He told Lena that if she had been honest about losing her job, we would have helped her without hesitation. He would have offered her temporary administrative work at his architecture firm while she looked for a new position. But the deliberate, calculated deception, the way she had manipulated my time and emotions, and the sheer malice in her recorded words had crossed a line. He told her she needed to pack her things and leave by the end of the day. Lena became defensive and hostile. She turned on me, her eyes blazing. "This is your fault," she spat. "You've changed him. You've made him choose you over his own flesh and blood." She brought up a time from 2 years ago when Robert had chosen to attend my niece's wedding instead of family reunion on Isabel's side, citing it as definitive proof that I had usurped her place. She sneered that her father had become domesticated and boring since marrying me, abandoning the passionate, driven artist he once was. That last comment, after everything I had done for her, broke the dam of my composure. I told her that she and her mother were two of the most manipulative, entitled people I had ever met. I said that while her mother's bitterness might be understandable, a daughter's disrespect was not. I called them both users who only saw Robert as a resource to be exploited. I pointed out the hypocrisy of her mother complaining for years about his woodworking, only to now criticize him for doing less of it. I listed specific instances where Robert had supported her financially after college, including covering her first 6 months of rent and buying her a professional-grade laptop. And then, in the heat of the moment, I said the words I would later regret. "As long as I am your father's wife," I told her, my voice cold and sharp, "I will make sure you never manipulate him or take advantage of his guilt again, even if that means encouraging him to cut you out of our lives completely." Lena fell silent, a mix of shock and fury on her face. She turned, walked into the guest room, and slammed the door. She didn't come out for the rest of the evening. The next morning, she was gone. The room was spotless, the bed neatly made with the linens washed and folded. The new keyboard was left on the desk. On the kitchen counter, she had left her key, with a note that read, "I won't be needing this anymore." We thought the worst was over, but then Isabel began her campaign. My phone was flooded with furious texts demanding I apologize for my vile words, insisting I had no right to speak to her daughter that way as I wasn't real family. She called Robert's office repeatedly, forcing his assistant to screen his calls. She sent long, rambling emails justifying Lena's behavior as a natural consequence of Robert's paternal failures. We blocked her number, but she found other ways, contacting Robert's siblings and even showing up at his office building. She caused a scene in the lobby, shouting about irresponsible fathers and home-wrecking new wives until security was called to escort her out. She left a venomous letter on Robert's windshield, cataloging every perceived failure from the past 20 years and ending with a vague threat to make him pay for allowing me to speak to her daughter that way. Robert acknowledged that my final comment had been harsh, but he believed that Lena's actions had warranted a strong response. However, He was troubled by my specific threat about cutting her out of his life. He felt it sounded controlling and that I had overstepped, making a decision that was ultimately his to make. While I stood by the core of what I had said, I had to admit he was right about that one line. It had come from a place of hurt and anger, and it was a step too far. Thank you to everyone who shared their thoughts. I want to clarify something crucial. A parent's love and protectiveness toward their child is a powerful, primal force, and Robert's conflicted feelings about my confrontation with Lena are completely natural. If our positions were reversed, I would feel the same turmoil. This is not a case of Robert versus me. We are a team processing a difficult situation together. Please refrain from criticizing my husband in your comments. He is not to blame for this. After a couple of days of quiet reflection, Robert and I sat down and talked through everything. I acknowledged that my statement about cutting Lena out of his life was excessive and unfair, but I also stated that, given the circumstances, I wouldn't be apologizing for it. To my surprise, Robert agreed. He said no apology was owed from my side. He believes the apology owed is from Lena to both of us, especially considering professional sacrifices I made to care for her under false pretenses. He confirmed that he has often seen Isabel's sense of entitlement reflected in Lena's behavior, a pattern he has worried about for years but felt powerless to change, largely due to his own guilt. During our conversation, he became emotional, describing his struggle to instill a strong work ethic and integrity in his daughter, while feeling that his ex-wife was constantly undermining those lessons. He expressed a deep sense of responsibility, wondering if his absence during her teenage years had directly contributed to these manipulative tendencies. If I had been more present, he said, his voice thick with regret, maybe she would have learned a different way to handle adversity. He shared a memory of Lena, around 14, showing a flicker of interest in his workshop. She had asked him to teach her how to build a simple birdhouse. They worked on it together for 2 afternoons, and he recalled it as one of the happiest, most connected moments they had shared during her adolescence. But Isabel had put a stop to it, declaring it too dangerous and enrolling Lena in additional ballet and piano lessons instead, activities that conveniently occurred on the weekends Robert usually dedicated to his craft. When he missed her recitals for woodworking shows, it only reinforced the narrative that he didn't care. I reassured him that he wasn't solely to blame. He had worked exhausting hours as a lead architect to provide for his family, and his woodworking was not just a hobby. It was a creative outlet and a form of therapy. He always met his financial obligations and had fully funded Lena's college savings plan. His ex-wife, however, had refused to adjust her lavish spending to fit their actual income. She regularly redecorated their home, demanded new luxury cars every few years, and insisted on 5-star vacations, all while subtly and not so subtly comparing their lifestyle to that of her wealthy parents. When Robert suggested more modest alternatives, she accused him of being cheap and trying to control her. Her parents would often interject, making comments about how their daughter was slumming it and how a truly successful man would provide a life of ease. The loans from her parents were never formal, always given with strings attached, which allowed them to constantly remind Robert of his perceived inadequacies. He took on extra freelance projects to pay down this debt, which ironically took him away from home even more. I pointed out that Isabel, even now, had a choice. She could have guided her adult daughter towards honesty and self-sufficiency. Instead, she became a co-conspirator in a scheme of deception. Lena needs guidance, but her mother is a corrosive influence. Eventually, Lena will have to see that her mother doesn't always have her best interests at heart, but uses her as a tool to continue her conflict with Robert. Robert nodded grimly, adding that during the divorce, Isabel would frequently change agreed-upon visitation at the last minute, citing Lena's busy social or academic schedule. When he tried to attend school events on his own, he would often find they had been rescheduled or canceled without his knowledge. She controlled the narrative and the access, limiting his involvement while simultaneously criticizing him for being absent. We decided that the only way forward was to completely disengage from Isabel. Responding to her accusations would only feed the drama. The ball is now in Lena's court. Whether she chooses to reflect, apologize, and rebuild a relationship with her father, or continue down the path her mother has laid out, is a decision she must make for herself. 3 weeks have passed since my last update. For days after I posted it, Isabel showed up at our apartment door unannounced at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. When I answered, she immediately demanded to know why we were ignoring her. I calmly told her that neither Robert nor I had anything to say to her. She brushed past me into the entryway, her perfume leaving a heavy trail in the air, and started shouting Robert's name. Her aggression triggered a swift and firm response from me. I told her she had no right to force her way into our home. She snapped back that this was a family matter and that I, as an outsider, had no place in it, just as I'd had no right to speak to her daughter the way I did. She referred to me as a second wife, never using my name, and said I should know my place in the hierarchy of my husband's life. Before Robert could get to the door, I stood my ground. This may have been your home and your family once, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. But I became part of this family when I married Robert. I was the one who cared for Lena, cooked her meals, drove her around, and rearranged my life for her while she and you were lying to us. That gives me every right to call out her behavior. Robert arrived then and firmly told Isabel to leave, stating he had nothing to discuss with her. She became increasingly agitated, insisting he was being unreasonable and should prioritize his daughter over me. She dredged up specific instances from their marriage when he had chosen woodworking exhibitions over family commitments, arguing that his current behavior proved he had never truly valued family. When he remained stoically silent, she eventually ran out of steam and resorted to cursing before storming out. As she left, she hurled a final threat over her shoulder. "You'll never see your daughter again. I'll make sure of it." That parting shot only confirmed what I had suspected all along. She viewed Lena not as a person, but as leverage, the ultimate weapon in her enduring war against Robert. We decided to break our own rule of non-engagement, but only with Lena. We needed her to hear what her mother had said directly from us. Robert also wrote a long, heartfelt email to Lena. He detailed his perspective on her family history, the financial pressures, Isabel's unsustainable spending, and his own failings, particularly his emotional and physical absence. He explained why she might feel closer to her mother and distant from him. But he also pointed out that a parent who truly has their child's best interests at heart would not encourage deception and manipulation. He shared specific, cherished memories from her childhood, teaching her to ride a bike without training wheels, the summer they built a treehouse together, the immense pride he felt at her high school graduation. He told her he kept photos of those moments in his office and looked at them every day. He expressed his unwavering love for her, despite all the pain. He listed the ways he had always tried to support her, from helping her with college applications to buying her that first professional laptop. He acknowledged his regret for not being more present, but emphasized that his desire to have a genuine relationship with her now was real. He ended by saying he would respect her decision, whatever it was, but that he hoped for a chance to reconcile. For nearly 2 weeks, there was only silence. Then, yesterday, a reply appeared in Robert's inbox. Lena apologized. She said she had acted childishly and maliciously. She explained that even though she was an adult when her parents divorced, it had shaken her world. Seeing her father become the engaged, present partner for me that he hadn't been for her mother filled her with a deep, corrosive resentment. The apparent ease of our marriage made her question whether he had ever really tried with them. She admitted that her mother's guidance had been profoundly misguided, and revealed that they had been arguing frequently since the confrontation. Isabel was insisting she maintain a united front against us, framing any reconciliation as a betrayal. After reading her father's email, with its raw honesty and lack of accusation, she felt a genuine sense of remorse. She asked for another chance. She mentioned she had a promising second interview with a different law firm and wanted to share the news with him in person. We invited her to dinner for the following night. The dinner with Lena surpassed anything we had dared to hope for. She arrived exactly on time, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a gift basket from a local artisan market. It felt overly formal, but the gesture seemed to come from a place of sincere contrition. The moment she stepped inside, she began apologizing, her words tumbling out in a rush. She hugged Robert, and they held each other for a long time, a silent communication passing between them that words could never capture. She then painted a very different picture of the last few weeks. Contrary to our assumptions, she hadn't been staying with her mother. After leaving our apartment, she had gone to Isabel's, only to be told that her mother was now living with her new boyfriend, and that having Lena stay there would be inconvenient. The business trip story had been a complete fabrication from the start. Lena had been sleeping on the couch of a friend from college, all while job hunting and trying to maintain a fragile connection with her mother over phone. She told us that my words during our confrontation had hit her hard, not because they were cruel, but because they held a painful truth. My assessment had forced her to take a hard look at her own behavior and her mother's influence. When she had first considered apologizing to us, her mother had reacted with fury, which had sparked their first real, honest arguments. Receiving her father's email, with his side of the story laid out so vulnerably, was the final push she needed to critically evaluate her relationship with her mother for the first time in her life. She explained that throughout the divorce and its aftermath, Isabel had consistently painted Robert as the villain, selfish, emotionally stunted, and prioritizing his pieces over his own family. This narrative had been woven into the fabric of her adolescence, creating a story where her father was solely responsible for the collapse of their home. When I came into the picture, Isabel had intensified her campaign, suggesting that Robert's ability to change for me was proof that he had been capable of it all along, but had simply chosen not to be for them. To a daughter who had always craved her father's attention, this was a poison that felt like truth. Isabel, she realized, had exploited the existing distance between them to further her own agenda of alienation. Lena has now decided to take a significant step back from her mother to focus on rebuilding her relationship with her father. She mentioned that Isabel's new boyfriend is very controlling, making major decisions about their shared life without consulting her, a bitter irony given the accusations she had leveled at Robert for years. She confirmed her second interview went well, and she is hopeful about the job. She is determined to stand on her own 2 feet. After dinner, she asked if she could see Robert's current project in his home workshop. They disappeared into the garage for over an hour, and I could hear the low murmur of their voices, punctuated by the occasional shared laugh. It was the sound of a bridge being carefully, tentatively rebuilt. I have accepted her apology completely. At 24, she is still navigating adulthood, and the complicated loyalties of a broken family can cloud anyone's judgment. We all make mistakes, especially when we are hurt. What matters is the courage to face them and the willingness to make amends. Robert seems lighter, the constant worry in his eyes finally easing. I am profoundly optimistic about our future as a blended family. Last weekend, Lena joined us for a local artisan fair where Robert was displaying his latest finished piece, a beautiful, handcrafted dining table. It was the first public event they had attended together in years. Watching them explain the joinery and the wood's-grained interested visitors, I saw the foundation of a new, healthier relationship being laid. We plan to have a standing monthly dinner, a regular, pressure-free space for us to connect and communicate. And for the first time since I've known them, their conversation flowed effortlessly, unburdened by the heavy silence of the past.